You know, in any war, there are places you just assume are safe. We're talking deep inside a country's own borders, miles and miles away from any fighting. They're supposed to be untouchable. So what happens when that assumption gets blown completely out of the water? Well, that's what we're digging into today.
I mean, for Russia, this was basically gospel. The idea that their own warships, sailing through their own internal waterways, they had to be safe, right? Untouchable.
But as it turns out, that belief was completely, and I mean utterly wrong.
So let's talk about this impossible strike. We're looking at a Ukrainian attack that managed to hit one of Russia's brand new warships in a place nobody, and I mean nobody, thought was even a target. This thing really changes the game.
And get this, we're talking about 1,000 kilometers. That's over 600 miles away from Ukraine's border. This is deep, deep inside what Russia thought was a completely safe lockdown area.
Okay, so here are the details. Ukraine's Special Operations Forces took credit for hitting the Grad, a pretty modern missile ship. But here's the kicker, the really important part. This ship wasn't just sitting there in port. No, it was on the move, actively sailing through Lake Onega on its way from the Baltic to the Caspian Sea.
You know, when you hear that, the first thing you have to ask is, how? Seriously, how did they pull that off? Hitting a moving target from that kind of distance is just an incredible achievement.
All right, so as you'd expect, Ukraine is playing this one close to the chest. They're not giving away the secret sauce. But when you look at a strike with this kind of range and this kind of precision, really, there are only two ways it could have gone down.
It really boils down to a classic bang-for-your-buck situation. On one hand, you've got drones. They're way cheaper, you can make a lot of them, and hey, they've already proven they can go the distance. Then you've got missiles. They pack a much bigger punch, for sure, but they're super expensive, so you save those for the really, really important targets.
Okay, so if we're looking at drones, you've got a couple of main suspects. First, there's the Beaver. We know it can reach Moscow. But the one everyone's pointing to is the Loot-Yai. It's got the range, a decent payload, and let's be honest, it's the go-to weapon for these long-range jobs. Something like 80% of the oil refinery strikes, that was the Loot-Yai. It's their workhorse. Now, if we switch over to missiles, Ukraine has some seriously impressive homegrown tech. You've got the Long Neptune, which is basically the big brother of the missile that famously took down the Moskva, and then there's this beast called the Flamingo, which is kind of like a missile-drone hybrid with a ginormous warhead. But would you really use one of your trump cards on a single ship? Seems a bit like overkill, you know?
And that right there is the whole point of asymmetric warfare, isn't it? Why spend millions on a single missile when a much cheaper, easy-to-build drone can get the job done just as well? When you weigh the options, a long-range drone is almost certainly what they used.
Okay, so we've got a pretty good idea of how they did it. But that brings us to the next big question. Why this ship? Why go to all that trouble to hit this one particular vessel so incredibly far from any active combat zone?
Well, it turns out the Grad was a perfect target. It's one of Russia's newer ships, specifically designed for the kind of inland waterways it was in, and it's loaded to the gills with powerful missiles. But, and this is a huge but, it had a fatal flaw. It had practically zero air defense. Think of it like a heavyweight boxer with a ton of power but a glass jaw. It was a floating arsenal just waiting to get hit, and Ukraine knew exactly where to aim.
And make no mistake, this ship was a real threat. Its main weapon is the Kalibr K missile system. You've probably heard of them. They're the long-range cruise missiles Russia uses all the time to hit cities across Ukraine, so taking one of these launch platforms off the board, yeah, that's a huge win.
But wait, it gets even more serious. According to analysis from Missile Threat, there's a real possibility that these Kalibr missiles can carry nuclear warheads. So when you're talking about removing a potential carrier of tactical nukes, well, that becomes a top priority mission, no matter where that ship is hiding.
So this one strike, it's about way more than just one damaged ship. What it really does is shine a spotlight on a massive two-front crisis that's basically turning the whole Russian Navy into a sitting duck, just like the Grad was.
First up, you've got the economic front. Let's just look at the numbers. A modern warship like the Grad costs around $70 million.
And the drone that probably hit it? Maybe $200,000.
That is a 350 to 1 return on investment. I mean, that's just brutal, devastating math for Russia. It's a kind of efficiency that is almost impossible to fight against. But the problem for Russia goes way deeper than just losing the money game on the battlefield. The second front of this crisis is back at home, in Russia's own shipyards. Western sanctions have absolutely hammered their ability to build new ships or even repair the old ones. We're seeing huge shipyards failing to deliver on massive contracts. I mean, one of them is even named after the lake where the Kargrad was hit. You can't make this stuff up.
Just take a look at the Khabarovsk plant, a super important facility. They had to lay off 70% of their workers. 70%! Why? Because the orders just stopped coming. There's no money, no parts. So it raises a really simple, and for Russia, a really terrifying question. How are you supposed to replace the ships you're losing when the places that build them are falling apart?
And that, right there, is what we mean by defenseless by attrition. It's a double whammy. It's not just about ships getting blown up by Ukrainian drones. It's about an industrial backbone that's so broken by sanctions that it can't build replacements. Every single loss is permanent. The Russian Navy is just getting smaller and smaller, one strike at a time, with no way to bounce back. So where does that leave us? Well, Ukraine has proven no Russian warship anywhere is safe. And at the same time, sanctions have proven that when a ship is gone, it's probably gone for good. So the big question we're left with is this. Are we watching the Russian Navy become a hollow force? A fleet that's defenseless at sea and just as defenseless in its own shipyards?